Autism is not diagnosed in infancy, but the earliest signs appear there, in the first months of life, in patterns that parents see every day without knowing what they're looking at. The average age of autism diagnosis in the United States is still around 4 years old. That gap, between when the signs appear and when the diagnosis happens, represents years of brain development during which early intervention could have made a significant difference. Research is clear on this. The earlier intervention begins, the better the outcome. The brain in the first 2 years of life has a level of plasticity it will never have again. Intervention during that window produces results that intervention at age 4 or 5 cannot replicate. This video is not about diagnosing your baby. It is about knowing which patterns to take seriously, which questions to bring to your pediatrician, and when not to wait for the next scheduled appointment. In this video, you'll learn 5 early behavioral patterns associated with autism that are observable in the first year of life, what each one looks like, why it matters, and what to do when you see it. If this channel is new to you, subscribe. We publish new videos every week on infant development and behavior based on current scientific evidence. Number 1. Reduced or absent eye contact. By 6 to 8 weeks, most babies begin making sustained, deliberate eye contact with caregivers. This is not accidental. The human brain has specialized circuits, located in an area called the superior temporal sulcus, that are dedicated specifically to processing faces, gaze direction, and social attention. These circuits begin activating in the early weeks of life and are what drive the newborn's orientation toward human faces. In babies who will later receive an autism diagnosis, studies using eye tracking technology have found a measurable decline in attention to eyes that begins as early as 2 to 6 months, before any behavioral signs are obvious to parents or clinicians. The baby is still looking at faces, but the specific orientation toward the eye region, the most socially informative part of the face, is already beginning to diverge from the typical developmental trajectory. What this looks like in daily life: a baby who looks past people rather than at them, who does not orient to a face when it enters their visual field, who is difficult to engage in a gaze and response exchange, or who makes eye contact briefly and inconsistently rather than sustaining it. The key word is consistently. Every baby has moments of disengagement, when they are tired, overstimulated, or simply attending to something else. The pattern that warrants attention is a baby who rarely makes eye contact across a range of situations, caregivers, and states of alertness. What to do? Track the pattern across several days. Note when eye contact happens and when it doesn't. Bring your observations to the pediatrician, not as a concern you're asking them to confirm, but as a specific behavioral pattern you've documented. Specific observations lead to better clinical conversations than general worry. Number 2. Not responding to their name by 9 to 10 months. Responding to one's own name is a social milestone, not just an auditory one. A baby who turns toward a sound is demonstrating hearing. A baby who turns specifically when their name is called and not when a similar sound is produced is demonstrating social attention, the understanding that their name is a signal directed at them personally, and that responding to it is part of how social exchange works. This distinction matters because babies who will later be diagnosed with autism often have normal hearing. They respond to environmental sounds, they startle at loud noises, they turn toward music or voices in general. What is often absent or inconsistent is the specific response to their own name, the social salience of being called. By 9 to 10 months, a baby should reliably turn toward the sound of their name when called by a familiar caregiver, even from across the room, and even when engaged with a toy or object. Reliable means most of the time, not every single time, because all babies will occasionally be too absorbed to respond, but consistently enough that the pattern is clear. A baby who responds to their name fewer than half the times it is called, who responds to other sounds but not specifically to their name, or who stopped responding to their name after a period of responding reliably, is showing a pattern that warrants evaluation. Research on early autism identification has found that inconsistent name response at 9 months is one of the behavioral markers with the highest predictive value for later diagnosis. It is also one of the most commonly dismissed. Parents frequently assume the baby is just distracted, stubborn, or going through a phase. What to do? Test name response deliberately. Call the baby's name when they are calm and alert, not engaged in intense play, from a position where you are not already in their line of sight. Do this across multiple days. If the response is consistently absent or highly inconsistent, bring it to your pediatrician and request a developmental screening. Number 3. Limited or absent joint attention. Joint attention is the ability to share focus on an object or event with another person, to follow someone else's gaze or pointing gesture to look at what they are looking at, and to redirect someone else's attention towards something you want them to see. It sounds simple. It is one of the most cognitively sophisticated things a baby does in the first year of life. Joint attention requires the baby to understand that other people have a perspective, that another person's gaze is directed somewhere meaningful, and that following that gaze will reveal something worth seeing. It also requires the understanding that attention is something that can be shared, redirected, and communicated. This is one of the foundational cognitive operations that underlies language, social learning, and eventually theory of mind, the ability to understand that other people have thoughts, beliefs, and intentions distinct from your own. Joint attention typically emerges between 9 and 12 months. A baby at this age should be following a caregiver's pointing gesture to look at an object across the room. They should be looking back at a caregiver's face to share a reaction, looking at a new toy, then looking at your face, then back at the toy. They should be pointing themselves, not to request something they want, but to share something interesting, a bird outside the window, a dog across the room. In babies who will later be diagnosed with autism, joint attention is frequently absent, delayed, or qualitatively different. The baby may look at a pointed finger rather than following the gesture to its referent. They may not look back at a caregiver's face to share a reaction. They may not point to share interest. The absence of joint attention by 12 months is one of the strongest behavioral predictors of autism diagnosis and is a core component of early screening tools used by developmental pediatricians. What to do? Observe whether your baby follows your pointing gesture to look at something across the room. Observe whether they look back at your face after seeing something interesting. Observe whether they point, not to reach for something, but to show you something. Bring your observations to the pediatrician. If the baby is approaching 12 months without these behaviors, request a formal developmental screening rather than waiting for the next routine visit. Number 4. Limited range of facial expressions and emotional response. Emotional expression in infancy is not just communication. It is evidence of the underlying social brain circuits functioning as expected. When a baby smiles in response to a smile, furrows their brow in response to a stern voice, or shows visible excitement when a familiar person appears, they are demonstrating that the circuits linking social perception to emotional response are connected and active. In typical development, the emotional repertoire expands rapidly through the first year. By 3 months, the social smile is established. By 4 to 6 months, babies show clear expressions of joy, surprise, and displeasure. By 9 to 12 months, they show social referencing, looking at a caregiver's face to read their emotional reaction to an ambiguous situation before deciding how to respond themselves. In babies who will later be diagnosed with autism, the range of facial expressions is frequently more limited. The baby may show fewer expressions overall, may not mirror the expressions of caregivers, or may show expressions that are not clearly linked to social context, laughing when there is nothing to laugh at, or showing little visible reaction to events that would typically produce a strong emotional response. The social smile, specifically, a smile that appears in response to a familiar face or voice and is accompanied by eye contact, is a key marker. A baby who smiles but does not make eye contact while smiling is showing a qualitatively different pattern from a baby whose smile is embedded in a full social exchange. Social referencing, looking at a caregiver's face to gauge their reaction before responding to something unfamiliar, is another marker in the second half of the first year. A baby who does not look to a caregiver's face for emotional information when encountering something new or ambiguous is missing a key component of social learning. What to do? Observe the context of your baby's smiles. Are they directed at people? Are they accompanied by eye contact? Observe whether your baby looks at your face when something new or surprising happens. If the emotional and expressive range seems consistently narrow, flat, or disconnected from social context across several weeks, bring it to your pediatrician as a specific observation. Number 5. Repetitive movements or unusual sensory responses. No single sign on this list means autism. This one in isolation means even less, because repetitive movements are a normal part of early motor development. Babies rock, bang, shake, and repeat movements as a way of exploring sensory feedback and developing motor control. The patterns that warrant attention are different in 2 ways. They are unusually intense or prolonged relative to what is developmentally expected, and they appear to serve a self-regulatory or self-stimulatory function rather than an exploratory one. Examples: hand flapping that occurs consistently in response to excitement or distress, prolonged spinning of objects or fixation on parts of objects, wheels, spinning tops, the edge of a book, rather than the object as a whole. Rocking that continues past the point of other engagement and serves as a consistent response to stimulation. Visual self-stimulation such as looking at lights, fans, or moving objects with unusual intensity and duration. Unusual sensory responses also fall into this category. A baby who is extremely distressed by sounds, textures, or lights that other babies tolerate without difficulty, or conversely, a baby who shows markedly reduced response to pain or discomfort, may be showing early signs of sensory processing differences that are associated with autism. The clinical term for these behaviors is restricted and repetitive behaviors, and they are one of the two core diagnostic criteria for autism. Their presence in infancy does not confirm diagnosis. Many of these behaviors appear in neurotypical development as well. Their presence in combination with the social communication patterns described in the previous items is what increases the clinical relevance. What to do? Note whether repetitive behaviors appear in context, as part of play, during transitions, in response to stimulation, and whether they are easily interrupted. A baby who can be redirected out of a repetitive behavior and who engages in it as part of a broader range of activity is showing a different pattern from a baby for whom the behavior is persistent, intense, and resistant to interruption. Bring your observations to the pediatrician as specific descriptions, not general concerns. None of these signs confirms autism. All of them are worth taking seriously. The goal is not to arrive at a diagnosis. The goal is to get into the right professional hands as early as possible, because if intervention is needed, starting it inside the first 2 years produces outcomes that cannot be replicated later. Trust what you observe. Document it specifically. Bring it to your pediatrician, and if your concern is not addressed, ask for a referral to a developmental pediatrician. The free guide in the description covers all developmental milestones from birth to 12 months, including the social and communication milestones most relevant to early identification. Download it and keep it as your reference. The next video covers how to build a sleep routine for your baby, step by step. Watch it next.